Well, good afternoon. We're going to introduce the first lecture in this first International Congress on La Desbandada. I am a part of the organizing committee. Encarnación Barranquero Texeira is a professor at the University of Malaga, professor of history and secretary of the Department of Modern and Contemporary History. She's main researcher of the research group number 68, focused on the history of the present, and she's a part of the board of the magazine Historia Actual y Estudios de la Mujer, which is contemporary history and women studies. She's participated in a great number of papers, articles and studies focused on the Second Republic, on the Spanish War, I don't like to say the Civil War, the Franco regime, the transition, the repression, the violence, and in particular the repression against women during the Franco regime. She has a doctoral thesis on the implementation of the new state in Malaga after the war, and she had also a very well-known book on women in the Franco regime, and she has very recent titles such as titles published in 2080, for instance, The Fight of Women in Andalusia, issued in 2018 also. In 2019, another one, From Hope to Tragedy, the Women in the Spanish War. This last one published in 2020. Her work has been recognized with the prize awarded by the Equality Department of the Regional Government of Andalusia. In 2013, this is a prize issued by the regional Andalusian government. Encarnación is a great example of linkage between academia activity and activism, and of course she's an example of commitment with the historical memory. I have to thank her for being here. I think she's a very generous person. She's very engaged and committed with the social movements, and I think we should all listen to her very carefully. The problem is we only have 40 minutes, so the title of her lecture is The Flight Towards the Road of Almería as an Historical Event. The floor is yours, Encarnación. Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers of this first international conference. This is a great opportunity to share the research about all that Rodrigo just mentioned, but also, and in particular, about the massacre that happened in the road of Almería. Hello to all our friends here, Carmen Negrin, all the associations that are represented here today. And thank you, of course, and hello to all the participants that are here, because I guess they want to learn a little bit more about this terrible episode that took place 85 years ago. First of all, I'm going to try and explain all we know up to present about what we call La Desbandada. I don't really like this term because it comes from literature mainly, but it is true that if we say the escape towards the road of Malaga to Almería, that's too long, so we can accept this La Desbandada. Okay. So as I was saying, I'm going to explain what we know up to date about this episode. We are currently developing a research on this event. So I'm going to share with you some notions on this episode from an historical approach. And then I'm going to focus also on local aspects, a little bit like Mirta has made. So I'm going to go into details about this episode. I start with the image of this book. This book was issued in 1984 by Antonio Nadal. Antonio Nadal now denies this event, but in fact, when he published this book, it was the very first time that the booklet of Norman Bitium was translated, and we made a team, and I made part of that team that started to study and to research about the post-war repression in Malaga. So it is not true that we don't know anything about the road massacre until 84, because we did knew some things. And of course, we talked about it at home. But at that time, the booklet of Norman Bitium was already translated, and we had this information of this help organization he made part of, and they already talked about the refugees arriving in Almería in February 1937. Some years later, well, the book on the Civil War was from 84, and in 87 we published an article entitled "The Road of Almería: Testimonies and Facts." So we gathered a couple of testimonies around the first half of the 80s and at the beginning of the 90s. And these testimonies were of some of the survivors of these episodes. There were some adults, but it was very difficult to find testimonies from children, for instance, but at the time it was possible. And in this paper, we gather some of these testimonies, and we also include some pieces of information in the press. So this is to say that this episode was already known. Then later on, around 2007, we already start paying tribute to this episode. And then the Diputación, the regional government of Malaga, was already able to start commemorating this episode with a number of publications, with an exhibition also, even with the participation of Jesus Majadas, that was paying tribute to the figure of Norman Bain. And then my colleague and I issued this book entitled Población y Guerra Civil en Málaga, Population and Civil War in Malaga, which is an attempt to go beyond the limits of this episode, which is always limited to the road between Malaga and Almería. We wanted to broaden these borders and get up to El Campo de Gibraltar, which is a region in Cádiz. And many people came from there. They got to Malaga, and then later on they left Malaga, and we already know what happened next. At the time, we hadn't paid too much attention to the circumstances of the population that arrived to Malaga and to Almería, because most of this population then left and arrived to other places of the Republican area. Some of them stayed in Almería, but most of them left. And then in order to follow that a little bit, we made some research in Salamanca, in the archives where are kept all the documents of the Republican side. And then we studied how this population of refugees, composed by many women and men from Malaga, and how they arrived at Castellón, Catalonia, Castilla-La Mancha, etc., etc. So around 2007, we can already adopt a much broader approach that goes beyond the road from Malaga to Almería. But as we have called our exhibition, it's from Malaga to the Pyrenees. Because what we really want to study is the whole phenomenon of refugees from the Republican Spain. And what we're trying to commemorate here in the La Desbandada is just a part of it. In 2015, we also held an exhibition focused on Norman Bitium, curated by Jesus Majadas. And we also published a chapter in a book entitled Casares in History. We also promoted a series of magazines about the historical memory of Bajo Llobregat, a region in Catalonia. And some of our colleagues, such as Andrés Fernández y Maribel Brenes, who would be taking part in this conference as well, they published, for instance, 1937, Exodus from Malaga to Almería, New Researches. This book, they give a new figure, mostly based on a testimony. So they raise the figure up to 300,000. We do not have any archive with figures. We have never known the figure. We are making an estimate based on the facts we have. But what I wanted to highlight here is that with this book, we point at a higher number of refugees, according to one of the documents they study. I want to say also that from 2000, with the development of more memory associations, we see a higher interest towards this topic also. It all starts in 2000, because before that date there was interest, but it was limited to the academia domain. So there wasn't really a social impact of our research. So from that date, we can find more videos, for instance, more audiovisual materials. We have a collection of Alfonso Domingo, which is called The Memory Recovered. There is a video about the Death Road, 1937. And we had the testimony of Juan Marín, who had lived this experience throughout his father. And then we had another video entitled Pantalones a la Luna, which was produced by the Junta de Andalucía, by the regional government. We have more materials, and at that time, the regional government, around 2008, 2009, organized a commission in which I took part in order to identify particular locations of memory. These locations were not known by the general public. Then we organize actions with youth, with older people. We identified some particular places as places of memory and even places of suffering. And in that context, I worked for including the road to Malaga, Almería in this list of locations of memory. And then we have this publication by Luis Melero, which is called La Desbandada. And that got a bigger reach because it reached more people, a bigger public. Also, in the same time, more or less, I think it was when my colleague and I published the one I showed you before, this one. So at the same time, a little bit later, we had this publication coordinated by Fernando Arcas. In the one I participated in this one too, and it gathers a number of testimonies, and it also was completed by some audiovisual material, videos of these survivors explaining the whole history. Then we have this exhibition dated from about 4 or 5 years. It is called The Exodus through the road Malaga-Almería. And it was installed in the historical archive of the province of Malaga. And the exhibition showed some testimonies and also archive documents. And we also have this publication by Eusebio Rodríguez Padilla and Juan Francisco Colomina. I just saw in the stands this book, La Desbandada de Málaga in the province of Almería. And of course, Juan Francisco Colomina is also participating in this conference, I think not today. And Eusebio also, I just saw him in the stand selling this book. We also have a publication of a research about La Desbandada from the side of Almería, meaning what were the consequences of the arrival of such a great number of people, of refugees, to a city like Almería. And we have other testimonies that have finally been published as books. This one, La Guerra en Mis Ojos. And I also have seen some recordings in the YouTube channel, recordings of elder people that tell their stories, their personal stories. We also had a project of ISMED, History and Digital Memory. And we had a website where we made a virtual exhibition on the road Málaga-Almería. I think we did it in around 2016 or 2017. Besides that I wanted to share a paper about Norman Bidyon in the magazine Historia del Presente, History of the Present. So, in conclusion, about all the publications about La Desbandada, the last one is this book by Natalia Fernández Díaz, also entitled La Desbandada, and also available for selling in the stands. And there is also a catalogue of the exhibition La Desbanda 1937 from Malaga to the Pyrenees. It's going to be 400 pages catalogue with text from Norman Beatum, with other experts on this topic, experts on the refugees topic in the Republican territory during the Spanish War, just as it is going to appear in the new democratic memory law. So, with this book and the exhibition catalogue, which is going to be published in a couple of days, I just want to show that most of these works are quite recent. We have the very first one issued in 1984, a couple of them in the 90s, but more limited to the academia field, to the academia domain. And then from year 2000, and in particular from 2003, that's the period when we have most of the publications, activities, and commemorations, tributes, and of course all these actions carried out by the memory associations have contributed to disseminate the information about this historical episode. We all have the same question: why everybody knows Guernica and nobody knows the road from Malaga to Almería? Why is that? So many journalists have tried to tell me that Guernica was nothing compared to Almería, and I don't think that's right. Guernica was absolutely dramatic. It was a bombing with official figures that go beyond 600, more than 600. Some other sources talk about more than 1,000, but I can't say that was nothing compared to the road of Almería. Of course not. But it is important that we talk about it. I wanted to continue by, well, after showing you all these publications, this one is the last one, the most recent one. This is the exhibition La Desbanda 1937, from Malaga to the Pyrenees. This is an exhibition open up to the end of the month. And you also have a possibility to go in for free, because Unicaja, which is the bank hosting the exhibition, wants to charge a fee of €3 to get in, but if you go to our website, you can get a ticket to go in for free, actually. So I think probably in the audience there is people who has already seen the exhibition, because well, it is focused on the Kappa photo pictures. We have some models of boats and planes, and it is mainly an aesthetic focus for this exhibition. And we wanted to highlight, instead of focusing on one person like Norman Beaton, or instead of focusing on military aspects, we have wanted to highlight all the social aspects, and in particular the gender approach. So we give a great importance to women and children, because the role of women in keeping alive the families was very, very important. And I want to explain something else about this episode in order to show you how we develop our research actions. This has been a really difficult task, and we have put a lot of personal effort and personal will on this. Yesterday, Fernando Martinez, in a conference of didactics and historical memory, the new law is going to ease things for the researchers, but we'll see. Anyway, you can imagine how difficult it was to start researching on this topic in the 70s, because we didn't have a national policy, of course, and all we had was the personal will. So we had to start little by little asking to the people in our context, and we didn't have any money, of course. So we start working with oral sources. We visited the archive of Salamanca. We searched in institutions of hosting institutions. So in every municipality of the whole east of Spain, Catalonia, and then we searched for the registries of the people who arrived at every municipality. And sometimes the people from Malaga, there are several pages of names of people from Malaga. And then later on, we could also see which was the budget for weapons. Weapons was the very first, the most important part of the budget, but then we have the second priority in the budget was the assistance to refugees. So in the East, they gave a great assistance to the population from Malaga, arriving to Almería and then later on going into the north. So all the archives of the civil governments, we found some letters between governors, and they ask each other, do you have children for Malaga? Or do you know if you have the parents of these children or whatever? So we started working from that information available on the civil government archives, which are usually in the provincial archives.
But there is a last archive-related dimension, which is the access to military archives. The access to these military archives has allowed us to see the road from Malaga to Almería as a way of punishing, like a single punishment, or this one being accompanied by other main accusations. And more precisely, that is what I was studying at this time, and I will explain it to you briefly, because I think I just have like 5 minutes left and the conclusions. The first thing that we studied in Malaga, the capital city, how this city multiplied its population when they were receiving people since the very beginning of the war, July, and the last days of July. We have groups of people coming from the region of Antequera, also the western areas of the province, also the Ronda mountain ranges, the field of Gibraltar. The other day, Al Galbani, a professor at an institute in Cádiz, he read his doctoral thesis on refugees in the field of Gibraltar. So we saw how Malaga creates an accommodation committee. This accommodation committee was presided by a very young teacher, Lina Molina Rivero, who in our catalog, you can find her life story, because she wrote her memoirs as well. Well, this accommodation and welcoming committee had to open houses that had been abandoned by people from right political parties, people that had left Malaga, and Malaga could use this in the first few months of the Republic. We studied how they opened convents, churches, and finally, and when they couldn't do anything else, the cathedral itself. And not without protecting the different chapels to prevent to avoid some historical deterioration. So in the cathedral was the refuge, the biggest refuge. What people during those months, people died of died because of bombings. Something like 230 people that were dead because of these bombings, and they also died because of diseases, epidemics, with meningitis, bronchopneumonia in refugees, and also mainly in the cathedral. And we could see that that was mainly boys and girls that came from the Ronda mountainous areas, the most western areas of the province. Then we studied why they, thanks to the different testimonies, why people run away. They run away because the refugees that came to Malaga, according to the Welcoming and Accommodation Committee, 60,000 of them, they came here telling their stories, what they had lived through in their villages, what they have heard from others, and that scared the population totally. They were very worried about the daily bombings and the lack of supplies, things like food, medicines, etc. So the evacuation was totally disorganized. Why? Well, there are several interpretations, historical geographic interpretations of this. Some defend that the authority of the Republican government seemed to be, in the midst of the Jarama battle, it preferred or couldn't send weapons and armament to Malaga, and they to protect the capital of the Republic, or maybe the symbolic one, which was Madrid. Other interpretations say that Malaga was a province where there was a prevalence of anarchism and communism over socialism, if we compared it with what happened in Almería or other places. So Malaga was not evacuated orderly, and people started to leave when they were hearing the cannon shots in Torremolinos and the area of the Guadalhorce River. Regarding the suffering on the road, we have the majority of testimonies, and in our exhibition we also have the pictures taken by the driver of Norman Beatty ambulance, who took great pictures for the paper that Norman Beatty wrote. And while all of this, the approach that we're giving to our current research is how this served as a reason for punishment. So first we have the purges, so to speak, in the official jobs. For example, the council, the local government, because there was a disposition by the technical committee of the state that said that everybody that left when the saving army arrived had to be purged. So, in this way, also apart from the ones that had had some kind of activity in the Popular Front parties, or people that, even though they were not working during the Popular Front times, they were promoted during this stage. Those were the three reasons for purging. In the Council of Malaga, 150 people or 160 people were purged by this reason. But we have also discovered how the governor of Malaga to the patrons gave them the possibility of getting rid of them if on the 8th of February they had not gone to work, if they had escaped through on the road of Almería. Some of them claim, and most of all teachers and council workers, they said that it was a particular reason, that they were not there because they had gone to look for their children that had disappeared, and that also reached the military trials. They studied 155 processes, and I reached some conclusions that I'm going to sum up for you. The majority of those processes in which the main reason was to have escaped, or the secondary reason would be to have escaped on the Almería road, there is a majority of people from the province of Malaga, 58%. The proportion of women out of those 155 processes was 26%. The trials to women. Of all of those processes, men to women, most of them ended up with condemnation sentence. 74% of them were women, and the percentage of punishment was higher. And there was a higher number of people shot in those 150 procedures, military procedures. And I had collected some examples and how it appeared in the war processes. Here, Eusebio, who was in charge of the archive, well, he can recognize it very well. I have information also on the case of Malaga. At the entrance of the national troops, it left to Almería, and then it spent a couple of days in Almansa. So through the processes, we can see the way that the refugees followed. And this is the trial of a woman who was taken because she had offered coffee and food to some refugees. And in Cristóbal Cano, it said a young field worker who was 18 years old, who had appeared in Vélez de Benaudalla with his brother, were taken to the jail of Motril, and it said accused of fleeing after the national forces arrived. So because of that attitude, it showed the desire of continuing to work with the Marxists, and fear and rejection of the national forces. That was the main accusation, which it was a very generalized one. And I would like to finish saying that this accusation, this stigma, was appeared in an administrative way, not only in a social way, up to the years 60s and 70s. I found in the archive somebody who was asking for permission to open a small bar in the 60s, and people would be researched to see whether they had tried to escape in 1937. So this was a reason for punishment, and it was so virtually until the end. And I am very happy to see that this reason for repression was acknowledged, something that marked the daily life of the general population. So we do not only work with those executed and prisoners, but also these other kind of repression in which the La Desbanda had a lot to do. Thank you.
Bueno, un par de cosillas. Como estamos con los tiempos muy justitos, vamos a abrir un
Okay, a couple of things. We're going to open a closed time for questions with very precise questions, please, because we do not have a lot of time. If you want to have the floor, Mirta, did you want to say something? No? Oops. Okay, is there anybody who would like to ask something?
fondo.
Yes, at the back. Okay.
Os quiero
First of all, I would like to encourage you, because this ends on the 30th, I would like to recommend the exhibition that Encarnación mentioned before, La Desbandada 1937 de Málaga a los Pirineos. It's a very impressive exhibition. I have seen it 4 times. I've been there with groups of students, and it's really worth it. 5 exhibition rooms. It's in the Plaza del Obispo, Obispo Square, where the cathedral is. It finishes on the 31st in the afternoon, and it is really impressive. 5 rooms, and we have to thank Encarnación Barranquero and Lucía Prieto, who have worked very hard on it. There is, as I said, a very impressive work behind it. Something that caught my attention was seeing original documents. They are in some glass windows, and we would like that to be digitalized so that can be so that everybody can access it, because there are those people denying all of this. And we make reference to an old comrade that I don't want to mention his name, somebody who said that all of that was a lie. Well, one of the documents that we have there is the Baleares Vitacora, and whatever says there, it's something that they wrote themselves, so it's nothing that's been invented. And in one part of it, they talk about projectiles, timetables, and that they were bombing the general population. And that is something that the official report of Baleares is showing. So, okay, do you have a question? Yes, 1, 2, and 3. Good morning, everybody. First of all, I wanted to ask Mirta, when you talked about Okay, I'm going to move on to Encarnación, okay, because I forgot what I wanted to ask Mirta. The summaries of Malaga, there are some problems like my grandfather's ones that was not in the archive. I'm finding it difficult to recover it. You told me that you had some of those. Well, I will keep in touch with you because I have your email. But where are they now? Because they talked about Almería before, but they mentioned Seville later on. Can you clarify that for me? What I understand as a client, let's say, of the archive, what we could see in the archive were the summaries that had not been taken out of it. So since the transition, there have been some memory policies in which people have asked for some subsidies, some kind of money, financial aid. So those were taken out of the archive to be able to manage those claims and those applications, and that was not part of the archive. The Territorial 24 archive, which was the one of Malaga in 2015, it was taken to Seville, to the archive of the Eduardo Dato Street, where all of the documentation related to the military division, which was different from the political one. The troops of the south, all of that is in Eduardo Dato in Seville, and that's where the Malaga archive was taken. But in this archive, they lacked those documents that had been taken out of it to sort to those family requirements, but we don't know if they were taken to other military archives or other levels of the administration. In theory, some people in charge of the archive a few years ago, they told me that they should have gone back, but they didn't. Yes, we saw the list of those that were in Malaga, but those that were not part of it anymore, we could never have a look at them. And an open a question for Mirta. The militia archives of Malaga, where are they? Because my grandfather was a militiaman of the Pablo Iglesias Battalion, number 8 in Malaga, and I'm not able to find anything anywhere. Sometimes in exhibitions I can see some militias, and I can see the documentation with the pictures with the uniform, but I cannot find it. I don't know where the documentation of the militiamen were. Well, I haven't worked on it monographically, but I have found in Salamanca. In Salamanca, there is a lot of documentation regarding the first few moments, and this documentation was taken actually, and that's a place where you could look at. I cannot tell you for sure, because the situation of the archives in Spain, as we know, those of us who have researched several aspects, has been quite disastrous. And it's been the monopoly of the army, and is actually military documentation is still military. It still belongs to the army. Yes, well, it has improved a little bit, like the territorial court number 1 in Madrid. It's got, let's say, better access. It's more, let's say, tidy up. But it's in their hands still, yes. One more question, please, because we're running behind schedule. Yeah, just want to answer this person where they can know about the process of their family member. The process that the military archives followed was centralized in Granada, in the Capitanía of Granada. When this Capitanía disappeared, Malaga kept the proceedings that were part of the archive. But when they took one out of the archive, they sent it to Granada. So with those processes, after this 9th action, that was sent to the military archive of Almería. And that's where you can probably find it. That's all I wanted to say. It's probably there, although not all of them are there. But what they kept from Malaga was in Almería. In Almería, there are like 7,000 proceedings from Almería. From Malaga, I'm sorry. Okay, somebody else here. Short answers, short questions, please. Hello. Good morning, everybody. I wanted to know whether it is true or not, because I'm interested in knowing the origin of the current use of the word desbandar, if it comes from literature, more precisely the novel by Melero, or one day I heard, and this is why I'm asking, that apparently in one of the Quepo de Llano spheres, they used the term desbandar in the terms that we're using it now. I wanted to know if that is true or not. Yes, mainly since the novel of Melero, where he used the word desbandar, and probably it appeared in Quepo de Llano speeches and in a rejectful kind of way. That's why we do not like that much the term for this. But in Malaga, they talked about the fleeing, the flight, the running, but they didn't talk about la desbanda. When I was little at home, I heard something like, well, this neighbor run or didn't run. So this is the word that we use, but we never use the word desbanda. There was somebody was asking for the floor, okay, there, and then María José.
Quería preguntar si
I wanted to know if there is information on the things, you know, the robberies that happened in the families. I'm from Campillos. My mother, when they came back, they found that they had stolen everything from her home. She could recover her house, but she couldn't recover her animals in those circumstances. You know, that's why I wanted to ask this question. Yes, this is another topic that apparently they say that what Fernando Martinez said, that it's part of this democratic memory law. They established other repression mechanisms, like, for example, political responsibilities. And in the Provincial Historical Archive in Malaga, they do not keep all of them, but they keep some tens of reports. I don't know if you've tried in the Provincial Historical Archive the political responsibilities and goods taken. That's what was called before the political responsibilities, and that is the economic repression that is part of the physical repression, and that meant taking and stealing people's homes and establishing an economic responsibility for what they had done. Generally speaking, those fines were paid by the women of those that were caught, and some of those fines were very significant, and they were more than 1 million pesetas. But most of them were from 0 to 500 pesetas that, you know, were very harmful to the families. And when they came back, sometime later, whether because they had fled and they had been cut at the level of the road of Almeria, and they had lived through the first experience of the strongest repression, and when the war finished, when they came back from different points of the Republican Spain, that's what they found. They found that they had officially taken their houses, or maybe neighbors had done it particularly. And how can you give that back if you know you recognize that all of them were all of that what was seized, you know, money seizures and money taken from companies. As Fernando Martinez said yesterday, many of them were given back in the 50s. I'm talking about companies, but maybe those particular private thefts were more difficult to claim nowadays, because you do not claim it to an organization, but a neighbor that you had to live with for a long time. Yes, okay. No, this, I'm going to be brief. Yeah, but we have very strict timetable for lunchtime. Good morning. I wanted to ask Encarnación if it's true, or if it's a part of the legend, if it's true that that officially the rebel group gave a couple of hours to the regulars and the Moroccan troops too. I'm sorry, but I didn't get the last word because of some sound interference. Yes, that is true. They could steal. There is a book that talks about it, and it's the participation of those who came from the north of Africa. And they liked especially alarm clocks and typewriting machines. But the first military shock of the occupation gave rise to impunity for any kind of theft, for rapings, for things like that. Yes. Maria Jose, and the last floor will be given to Ana Pomares. I wanted to ask you, Mirta, you made a reference to the war front and aspects that had to do with military interventions. I don't think you mentioned, and here I would like to share this with everybody else, the role played by two battalions of the international brigades that were the ones that paralyzed the front up to the end of the war in the area of Motril and Cárcel de Ferro. Only that comment, because I think that's important. Yes, very briefly. These brigades were crucial in Madrid. The entrance of the brigades through the Gran Via, the main street, was so exceptional that when they thought they had been abandoned by everybody, you know, remember the non-intervention committee, there were some foreigners that were volunteers and were there to fight for the democratic Spain. So that was so important in Malaga, Madrid, and everywhere. That's why we celebrated forever. Ana, your turn. Yes, Ana Pomares, this is me. I went through the road of death, and you know what happened. And both of you have written my book. And what I want is to have a picture taken with both of you. That's why it was going to be very brief. Thank you very much. And our colleague here will tell you something. So wait a minute.
A ver, un segundo, por favor, para comunicar algunas cosas.
Okay, just a second. These people have to go to reception because there is a problem. Alcañil Raya, Del Valle Blasco, Martín López, Ramos Sánchez, Ruiz García, and Carlos Tellefer. There are two vehicles that have been parked in a forbidden area. If you don't take it away, they will be taken away. Those are the plate numbers. Maria Luisa Polo Polo has left her wallet on a chair. Her purse, sorry. Yes? Okay, we have it. Okay. I remind you that at 3:30 we start with our Paul Preston conference. If you're here, you will miss it. Here, in the conference room. Something else. And the next one is going to be two parallel tables. So have a look at the program so that you know which one you're most interested in. One will be held here, and the other one in Europa room next to reception. I remind you that this afternoon we have the meeting of survivals, which will be very interesting. And at 7:30 there will be a presentation of books while the Andrés Fernández Martín speech takes place. And tonight there will be a concert in the room Europa, Sala Europa. Thank you.